What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So today I want to talk about Paddy Pimblett and what to make of him after, his loss on Saturday at UFC 324. Because, I have to eat some crow. I picked him to win. And before anyone dogs on me too much about that, he was the favorite. People were picking him to win. And I still went 4-2 in my predictions, but which isn't a great majority. And that's I don't take predictions very seriously. I think no one is good at predictions. It's too chaotic of a sport. When people brag about their picks, they're bragging about getting 70% of them right. And that's just meaningless. That's a meaningless percentage. That's a meaningless majority. It's too chaotic. There's too much randomness. The people who have above average success in predictions, they don't have enough success that you can't just write it off as basic statistical probability. They're still within a standard deviation of the norm. Okay. So anyways, that aside, I do still have to try to explain what actually happened and what to make of Paddy and what in my predictions were accurate and what in my predictions were not accurate. Because I not only made the prediction video, but I made a video about Paddy and his style and whether or not he's actually good. I put that video out last week, and quite a lot of it, I think, was validated, but some of it was not. And the biggest thing that wasn't validated is that I gave Paddy far too much credit as a game planner, because I had thought in the Bobby Green and Michael Chandler fights that Paddy stuck to very good game plans, and particularly that he did well avoiding the pocket. And combining the performances themselves with what he said in the interviews leading up to those fights, where it was very clear to me that he was watching tape on his opponents, that he was studying them, that he was a clear fan and student of the game, which tends to, bode very well for fighters. All that together made me think he would come out with a pretty decent game plan against Justin. Even though his skills are lacking in certain areas, I thought the game plan would at least be there. And sadly, the game plan was not there at all. And yes, in the lead up to the Justin fight, he had been saying that he planned on striking with him. That he basically said, I envision myself just tanking his shots. I envision myself hurting him on the feet. I think I'm way better on the ground, but I think on the feet we're comparable. And so I envision myself hurting him. I'm younger, I'm bigger, I have a better chin. I'm going to hurt him. I hit harder than people realize. And after I hurt him on the feet, we're going to somehow get to the ground. And there I will finish him either with ground and pound or a submission. He was basically embracing the sort of Diaz brothers, box you up, turn you into a wrestler, ooh, you're a wrestler now kind of thing, get it to the ground, and now that you're fatigued and hurt, then go for the finish. That sounded like the fight he was suggesting would happen, and I thought that could happen. I think, had Paddy's strikes been a little bit more effective, had Justin's chin held up a little worse, I could have imagined that happening. I mean, he did still hurt Gaethje at points. In rounds 3 and 5, he did sting him pretty good. He didn't hurt him nearly as bad as Justin hurt him. Don't get me wrong. But, I could still see something like that happening, where he comes in with his combo, left hand uppercut, head kick, whatever, wobbles Justin, Justin tries to clinch up and dirty box, and, but he's kind of shaky, and Paddy just kind of, shucks him over, gets on top, gets mount, starts pounding. I could have seen that happening going into the fight. However, I thought when Paddy was saying those things that he was sort of half telling the truth, half lying, where I had assumed that in his mind, that was sort of the ideal way things could go. That was sort of the best case scenario, least opposition way the fight could go. I didn't think he was lying. I didn't think he was just saying that so Gaethje thought he would strike with him and then Paddy would come out and shoot a double right away. I didn't think that. However, I didn't think that was actually his main approach. I didn't think that was how he thought the fight was definitely going to go. I assumed he had contingency plans for if the fight didn't go so well. However, he did not appear to have any such contingency plans, because the one most obvious thing that he should have done, which is not strike with Gaethje in the pocket and not allow himself to just be stuck on the fence, he didn't prevent either of those things from happening throughout the entire fight. He had no answer. He didn't even try to do anything. You might be tempted to watch that fight and say, holy shit, Paddy's striking is worse than we realized. I don't even think that's true. I think his striking looks the worst when he's back against the fence and he's striking in the pocket. When he's covering distance and throwing combinations, throwing, long hook, uppercut, head kick, that kind of stuff, he looks okay. Like, you still see the awkward mechanics, you still see him dropping his hand and stuff, but he looks kind of okay when he's striking at range like that. But when he's like standing still in the pocket trying to exchange power shots, that's where that sort of awkward look from him is most apparent, and some huge amount of the fight took place there. And of course Gaethje had the advantage. Of course Gaethje did more damage during those exchanges. It is miraculous Paddy survived. When I saw him getting hurt in round 1, I was like, oh shit, his chin is not holding up, because I thought his chin would hold up. I thought that he tanked a very flush right hand from Michael Chandler. Like, he threw a low kick and Chandler countered with an overhand. He ate that flush and was fine. And I thought that Chandler, punch for punch, hit harder than Gaethje, so I thought he would be able to absorb Gaethje's punishment. And technically he was. He did make the distance, but like only so barely. Like, he definitely, in round 1, I was like, oh shit, I definitely overestimated how well his chin was going to hold up against Gaethje. And don't get me wrong, I don't want this to be a video of like, I was secretly right because if he had just fought the way I assumed he would fight and that I know he could fight, he would have won. I'm not quite saying that, because there are things about him that I think we learned where, especially in his grappling, where it's not as good as people like I thought it was. But I do think there's like obvious things he could have done differently that would have made the fight a lot more winnable. So he needed to get the fight to the floor. Like, to not have a plan to get the fight to the floor without Justin being like rocked ahead of time is silly. And I know what some of you are going to say is like, oh, how could he get it to the floor? He's a terrible wrestler and Justin Gaethje's an All-American. Don't get me wrong, Paddy's takedowns aren't great. I thought they were showing improvement, because in the Chandler fight, he does get in on a single leg. He hikes the leg up. He almost gets him over. Chandler gets his leg out. Paddy gets to the back and fucking picks him up and slams him. To do that against Michael Chandler, who is also a good wrestler, who is also a very underrated grappler, to me, that was impressive. However, yes, Gaethje is the better athlete, and he is an All-American, so I wasn't expecting him to out-wrestle Gaethje straight up. Like, if they were drilling, if they were doing something where it's, you do this kind of drill in wrestling and in, MMA classes and stuff, but like, you start in on a single leg, one guy has the single leg, one guy's defending, you say, okay, go. The guy in on the singles trying to complete the takedown, the guy defending is trying to break grips and escape. If they were doing that kind of drilling, I would expect Gaethje to win every time. I would expect Gaethje to stay on his feet and escape. Just like in, I think it was the 5th round, where Paddy finally gets the body lock, he gets the double underhooks, and he's trying to get Gaethje down, and he's just unable to. That's what I would expect. I would expect if they were just in a standard wrestling position and it's Paddy trying to complete the takedown and Gaethje trying to defend, I would expect Gaethje to win. I would expect him to stay on the feet. But in MMA, not merely wrestling, but in MMA, there's a lot of ways to get to the floor, okay? You can catch a kick and just tackle the guy. You can low kick them, and it can like they can be like they can be starting to take a step forward, boom, you chop the leg out and they take a knee, and then you dive on top of them. You can just like push people over. Like, you can crash into the pocket and literally shove people and they can lose balance. They can swing at you and you can just cover and duck and go under the right hand, get a body lock, go to the back really quick, and then jump on for the backpack. Like, you can get a front head, you can just dive for a front headlock, like Brian Ortega style, jump guard, abandon the guillotine, hit a fucking omoplata sweep, like get on top. Like, there's a million ways, especially if you clearly have a jiu-jitsu advantage. There's a million ways to make grappling happen in an MMA fight. And you can jump guard, you can jump the triangle, which a lot of us thought would happen at some point, and it never did. And I think it would have been smart to do it. Even after he'd hurt him a bunch, Gaethje didn't actually want to sit in his guard. And he could have avoided being hurt by just knowing that, like, hey, if I can't keep my back off the fence, if he actually gets up in my face, I need to tie up and I need to like drag his ass to the floor. And if he backs up, fine, but that means I'm not getting hurt. Like, this is doable. This is doable with Paddy's skill set. So I do think the game plan was very lacking. And I do think in that way, he underdelivered, because again, he showed good game plans in the past, but he didn't appear to have one in this fight. That's that all being said. However, like, his grappling is worse than I thought it was, because In one of the videos I made last week, I said that if I had to describe Paddy, I would say he is Michael Chiesa, but with a better chin, more willing to scrap, possibly better game plans, and who just doesn't throw fights away by diving into his opponent's own submissions. Because Chiesa is a weird one. He's not a world champion jiu-jitsu guy or anything, but he's very legit in MMA, and he's beaten good guys. He submitted Beneil Dariush, who's an accomplished jiu-jitsu competitor. He submitted him. But he also gets submitted by strikers. He got submitted by Anthony Pettis. He got submitted by Jorge Masvidal. He got submitted by that welterweight whose name I forget. And that might be, I think people were kind of laughing at that comparison as almost being like an insult to Paddy because all they have in their memory is the recent losses on Chiesa's part. But a few years back, Chiesa was a very serious grappling threat. Just look at his fights with Diego Sanchez and Rafael dos Anjos. He was very good. And I thought that was kind of Paddy as a jiu-jitsu guy. But again, with those other attributes, like I said, better chin, more willing to trade, possibly better game plans, doesn't throw the fight away by getting caught in his own fight, in his opponent's submissions. To me, that was a very promising archetype. However, Paddy showed me that his grappling is not on that level. And a lot of that's to do with his athleticism. And I did call this in my video I put out last week because I said Paddy shows some very worrying things athletically. And those are that on the feet, he's very stiff. He's very awkward and tense. He's not loose in his torso. He's not loose when he strikes. And on the ground, it's the opposite. On the ground, he is loose. His core is loose and disconnected, and he's like a noodly, weak guy on the ground. And I'd said that ahead of time, but he really proved that in this fight with Justin because anytime they were on the ground, it was fucking pathetic. Anytime, and sometimes it was because he was hurt. It was he'd get dropped and then he'd get in half guard or something and Gaethje'd be punching him and whatever. But whether it was half guard, whether it was him turtling and trying to get up, him grabbing the arm, whether it was that front headlock position they kept ending up in and his inability to get out of that. In every case, not only did his grappling just technically not look good in terms of how he was problem solving, but athletically, he just looked like a weak noodle man whom Justin Gaethje could just manipulate around and fold in half at will. And if Justin Gaethje is doing that to you, that is a fucking problem because even though Gaethje's a good athlete, even though he's a good wrestler, Gaethje's grappling in MMA has never been good. And just look at what happened in his last fight against Fiziev. Fiziev took him down and got a fucking reverse triangle on him immediately. And Fiziev's a goddamn kickboxer. So it's but I think part of that's just those two guys are athletes in a way that Paddy clearly is not. And to me, that's also a big indictment. That weakness of his, that athletic weakness of his, is worse than I thought it was. And his game planning is definitely not as good as I hoped it was. So to me, those are my two takeaways. And I think if I'd known that going in, I'd be less inclined to pick him. So make of that what you will. Jump on me for getting it wrong all you like. But that's my assessment of him after this fight. Now, what does it mean going forward? Because going into the fight, I didn't think he was ever going to be champion. I didn't think he was ever going to beat Arman or Ilya or Islam. I didn't think he was at that level. But I thought he had the potential to be one rung below that, to be a sort of fringe top 5 guy. And if he had beaten Justin, I think that would have been validated. Having seen what I see now, he might not even be top 15 if we're being real. Now those rankings are distorted by old names that are still around, but there could easily be 15 fighters in the UFC lightweight division that would all beat Paddy. So it's not good. You can't look at a fight like that and then feel confident he's going to beat Benoit Saint-Denis. You know what I mean? So as far as his prospects, the UFC is still going to want to milk him. They're still going to want to use his name. So I kind of think you just need to make him an action fighter now. You just need to give him fun, scrappy fights against people with names who are old and kind of beatable. Just kind of keep doing what they were doing, because that's how they wanted to get him to the title shot, was just give him old names. maybe 37 is just the cutoff, because I think Ferguson and Chandler and Green, I think, were all 38 and 39 whereas Gaethje was only 37. So maybe they just fucked up by not waiting another year or two before booking the Gaethje fight. But I think that's the kind of stuff they should do. Like they should, maybe give him a Moicano. They should bring some fucking people out of retirement. They should see if they can get a Conor McGregor fight, wouldn't it be insane? Maybe they can get like Donald Cerrone to come out of retirement. They should give him Jim Miller. Like, they should just give him guys with names who are fun and who are really old. Like because what else are you going to do with him? Like his ceiling is clearly so much lower than even, than I thought it was, certainly. And I think, frankly, lower than all but his I think his ceiling is lower than all but his biggest haters thought it was. Because even people who were picking Justin, I don't think they thought Paddy was quite as bad as this. I mean, a few people, he does have actual haters who are just like, no, he sucks. He always sucked. I can tell he sucks. All these fights are Fugazi, or all these wins are Fugazi. Some people were saying that, don't get me wrong. But I think most people are a little surprised at how shittily he did on Saturday, even if they didn't expect him to win. So, again, going forward, the guy should be in his prime. He's like 30, 31. He's got tons of experience. This should have been the best version of him we'd ever seen. And it was, of course, terrible and underwhelming. So there's nothing to do with him except use his name in sort of fun, silly matchups against other people with names, who are old enough that he could win. Because if you give him anyone with a name who's not that old, they'll kill him. So, I'm sure Dana White and co. are really pissed right now because they wanted to do more with this guy, whereas he's like worse than Darren Till, actually. But that's the situation. Like, I don't know, give him Jim Miller. What else can you do? Like, any serious up-and-coming lightweight is probably going to beat him, it's hard to look at this now and not just say, look, he probably lost the Jared Gordon fight, and that probably just is his ceiling. He probably hasn't actually gotten better since then. He'd probably lose to him again. And that's his ceiling. His ceiling is like top 20 lightweight. So, what do you do?